Hey there, in this lesson we're going to continue talking about the collections framework, and more specifically we're going to go into some more details about the array list as well as the linked list. So let's get started. The previous lesson that I covered, that class is right here, application.java, and I put that into lesson 1. I created a package and I just put that class inside of lesson 1. And before moving forward, let me just apologize for the naming convention that I used for these packages. This was sort of an afterthought. While I was creating the course, I figured I'd have different sections, and each one of those sections would have its own set of lectures, and that's how I was organizing it. But once I published it all with slides and titles for these lectures. So forgive me for having these package names as lesson 1, lesson 2. You can name your packages anything you'd like. And we haven't officially gone over the naming convention that should be used in Java, in the industry for these packages. But we'll get into those details later on. For now, just name your packages anything you'd like, or you could choose the name that I have here. So for this particular lesson, I created another package called lesson 2. So right-click on this and go to New and select Class. We're going to create another class called Application. And this is just a class that we're going to be using to demo all of the examples that we're going over. So click on the public static void main method in there. That's where our main method is going to reside, the starting point for this application. So let's get started. I'm going to create an array list that can accept strings. Okay, so the only kind of data that's going to go into this list are going to be string data type. So let's just create some animals. And I'm going to do new array list and string. And you can press Control-Shift-O to import the array list library. So this is our variable, animals. It's of type array list string. And now we can populate animals with some animals. So let's just put in a lion in there. And then we're going to put in a cat. And if we have a cat, we should also have a dog. So let's put that in there. And one more animal, we'll get the bird. Okay, so here we have an array list that can accept strings, and I put some sample strings in here. I want to go over how to loop over this data structure. In the previous lesson, I briefly went over how to iterate over an array list, but I want to go over that in greater detail because I don't think I provided enough information. So there are two ways you can loop over this. You're already familiar with the traditional for loop, which goes like this. We first create an iterating variable. We'll call it I. And then the next thing is we specify a condition as long as I is less than some particular value. So we can actually do animals.size. This method belongs to the list interface. And since this array list is actually a list, it gives us access to this size method. So let's click on that, and we can just continue to run this loop as long as I is less than the size of this animals list. And then finally, we need to increment I because we would like this loop to eventually end. And we can just print out the animals.get at the ith index position. Okay, and this will allow us to traverse this entire list and print out the data. So let's hit play and notice that it prints out all of our animals. That's one approach. The other approach that I went over in the previous lesson was actually a for each loop, which was introduced in Java 5. So I went over that briefly. I want to go into a little bit more detail in this lesson on how to use that. So the first thing we need is the data type of the thing that we are going to be traversing. So the data type for animals is actually a string, right? That's what the value of each one of those animals is. It's going to be a string data type. So let's put that first. And then we can have any old variable. I can call it animal. I can call it value, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So we're defining a variable of type string. And this variable is going to be used to iterate over the collection. And what is a collection? That's this guy right here, animals. So to loop over animals, we could just do something like this. And now the variable value is going to take the place of every single animal in the animals array list. So I could just print out value just like that. So this is actually a simpler way of doing it compared to this one, but you can use both approaches. I like using this for array lists and collections because it's just easier. So let's hit play and notice that this first part is from the first loop, and then the second part is from the second loop right here. And by the way, you can use this for each loop for array lists as well as arrays. So I'll leave that up to you to try out. So moving on, the data type that goes in here must be backed by a type, a complex type, either a class or an interface or an abstract class. The type in here cannot be a primitive type. Okay, it has to be either a class or an interface. So let's actually create another class, and I'm going to populate an array list with instances of that class. So right here, I'm going to right click and go to new, and let's just create a class called vehicle. And it's not going to have the main method in there. We just need a basic class, and I'm going to define some variables in here, some attributes for this class. A vehicle can have a make, and it can have a model. It must have a price, and let's just have a Boolean value for whether the vehicle is a four-wheel drive or not. Okay, so there's a true or false value for this particular field. And you can right click and go to source and click on generate getters and setters. Just select all of these fields to have getters and setters. Hit OK, and that's going to automatically populate that. You should already be familiar with how to do that from the Getting Started in Java course, where we talk about object orientation. So these are the getters and setters that allow us to modify the fields. And then I can have a constructor. So I'm just going to right click, do the same thing, source, and then just go to generate constructor using fields and hit OK, and that generates our constructor. So going back to the application, I'm just going to comment out this code right here, and I'll create a new array list, and this time instead of it containing a string, it's going to actually contain a vehicle. Okay, so this array list is going to manage vehicles, and I'll give this the name vehicles. That's going to be the variable name. New array list, and the type is vehicle, and that's how we initialize it. By default, the array list size is going to be 10. So when this structure is created in the backend, it creates an array with size 10. You can specify whether, whatever size you want the array list to initially be created. This is the initial capacity. Notice the argument there, int initial capacity. If you don't put anything in there, it's going to default to the size 10. But anyway, let's start adding vehicles to our array list. So these are going to be instances of the vehicle class. So I could just do new vehicle and just use the constructor by passing in the different values. So we have a Honda Accord, that's the make and model. And then let's just say the price of it is going to be $12,000, and it's not a four-wheel drive. Okay, so that's one way of initializing an instance of a vehicle. You should remember how to initialize objects. We're doing that on this line right here. We're doing that up here. So just to show you how we could do that with vehicles, we could do vehicle, and I could just say vehicle 2, and then new vehicle, and then we pass in the different arguments for the constructor. So let's just say Toyota Camry. Let's just make this 12,000 as well, and it's not a four-wheel drive. Okay, so this is another way of initializing the vehicle. We're doing it inline right here without specifying any variable. We're just creating an instance, but right now on this line we've created an instance and assigned it to a variable that we can later use. Once the runtime environment gets to this particular line, it's going to create a new vehicle and assign it to this variable. In this case, we don't have a variable that we can refer to. We're just sort of creating a vehicle on the fly when the runtime environment gets to this point. .add, and then just specify the variable name for the particular vehicle, and that's going to be vehicle 2. Okay, so far we have one vehicle and we have another vehicle 2. Let me add some more things. Let's add a Jeep as the third vehicle. You could do new vehicle and then just put Jeep Wrangler, and let's just make this 25,000, and this is going to be a true four-wheel drive. Okay, so we have 3 vehicles in this collection. If I want to loop over these vehicles using the for each syntax, how would I do that? I want to leave that to you as an assignment. Pause the video now, try that out on your own, and then you can resume to watch how I do it. Okay, hopefully you took a shot at doing that. It's very simple, very similar to what we did up here. Instead, the data type up there was for strings. This is going to be a vehicle. So we could just do vehicle, and we'll name the variable anything. We can name it just car, for example. And the collection that it's going to be traversing over is called vehicles. So let's just put that array list right there. And now I could just print out the particular object. So I could just do car. And notice how it's going to be printed out. I'm going to run the play button here. Notice that it's giving us this hash code next to each one of these vehicles. These are vehicle objects, but we don't have a friendly string representation for these. So you could either do car.getMake, for example, and just print out each one of those attributes by calling the getters. We can do car.getModel. I think I spelled model wrong in the vehicle class. It's actually M-O-D-E-L, but I just left it M-O-D-L-E. Doesn't matter, whatever. Just using the method as it is for now. And then I could also just print out the car's price. Get price. Okay, and let's hit play, and notice now it's printing it in a more reader-friendly fashion, right? We're actually able to see the data. So instead of specifying the getters here and getting those individual values, it's just easier for me to just type in car and just hit play. And I would like it to print a more user-friendly looking representation for the particular car. So this is a pop quiz. You should already know how to do this from the previous course, Getting Started with Java. We covered how to use a particular method, how to implement a particular method in a class so that it has a more reader-friendly representation. So I'm going to leave this to you as an assignment. Pause the video, try this out. Hopefully it will rekindle your memory from that course if you forgot how to do it. So try it out, and then you can resume to watch how I did it. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you took a stab at that. A quick shortcut is we can go to the vehicles class, right-click, and go to source. You've already seen this in the previous course as well, so this should sort of be a refresher. Go to generate toString, and that's going to generate a string representation of each one of these values, the fields, make, model, price, and so on. So now if I hit play, notice that it prints the vehicles in somewhat of a more reader-friendly fashion. All right, so I just wanted to show you that you can have actual, your own instances in an array list. You just specify the type for the particular class that you create, and then use it as you would with a string or integer. And it doesn't have to be array list. It could be any one of the lists. We've seen the linked list. That was another implementation of the list interface. So if I click on array list, command click on array list, it takes us to the actual class. Notice that it implements the list interface. So let's click on that, and you can actually highlight list, double click on it, and press Control T, and that will bring up the class hierarchy. And you can see that the array list is an implementation of the list. It's a derivative of the list interface. Now, we went over interfaces in the previous course, Getting Started with Java. So if you need a refresher on that, make sure you revisit those lessons. Array list is one type of list. We also saw the linked list. These two are the most popular. And then there's also a vector down here. This is also pretty popular. But you need to know the array list and the linked list and why each one of them is useful. The array list is good for getting data, retrieving data from the list, and the linked list is good for manipulating the list structure, adding and removing things. The linked list is far better for doing that. But that's the general idea. They're both implementing the list interface, okay? So let me close these extra classes. And you'd use it just like you did the array list. So if I change this to linked list, it's going to work pretty much the same way. All right, you just have to import the class. Hover your mouse, it says import linked list. and I'm importing it right here. And everything, all the rest of the code is still the same. You still iterate over it the same exact way, okay? It's just the underlying structure, the data structure used in the linked list is slightly different than the array list, but you use it the same exact way. As a matter of fact, you could just use the list interface as a type, okay? And it's giving an error here. You just have to right click and go to import list from the util package, okay? If you hit Control-Shift-O, you have two options. You have Java util list and Java AWT list. You want to use the Java util list. That's what that is. So import that, and now the code is going to work exactly the same, okay? So hit play, and notice it's still working. And up here, we can make this also a list, because animals is a list and so is vehicles. They're both lists. The specifics of what instance is created is here on the right. This is a linked list and this is an array list. They work exactly the same way, and they both implement the list interface, so you can actually reference the parent type for these particular variables. Outside of the main method, right, this is the main method inside of this class. Outside of the main method, I'm going to define a static method. I can do public static void. It's not going to return anything, and I'm just going to say print elements, and let's just say it prints the elements of some list. Okay, I could use the for loop syntax. Let's just copy and paste it inside of here, uncomment that, and instead of animals, it's just going to be some list. So we do some list.size. As long as the I is less than the size of the list, it's going to continue to print out whatever is in some list. So we could do some list.get at the ith index position, and then this method, I can use this method to print out the contents of both of these lists, the animals as well as vehicles, because they are in fact both lists, even though one of them is a linked list and the other one is an array list. But the data type for animals as well as for vehicles is just the list interface. So this is sort of a generic method. It's not 100% generic yet, not completely. We'll go into the more details of how to make this even more generic, but it's semi-generic, and we can just use this method. I could just do print elements and pass in the vehicles collection, and I can also pass in the animals collection. I'm just going to copy paste this and just do animals as well. And I'm going to comment out this, so we're only using this particular method to print out the vehicles as well as the animals. So let's hit play and notice that it's working as expected. Okay, if I had left this as a linked list and I had left this as an array list, it would still work because these are both still lists. Okay, but the linked list data structure has some extra methods in there. If I do vehicles dot remove, it has the remove first method, whereas the array list up here does not have the remove first. We could do animals dot remove. It doesn't have remove first. It just has remove. So when you reference the parent type, when you reference the interface type in here, we have some limitations that are going to be consistent across both of these lists, so that we don't have issues with one functionality working with one list and not working for the other one. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So I could do some list dot, I could do remove, but it's not going to have remove first, okay, because this remove method belongs to the list interface. So both of these collections can work in this particular method. If I just do array list, then of course vehicles is a linked list. That's not going to work. If I use just a linked list, I can't pass in animals because that was an array list. So it's best to just reference their super type so that both of them qualify. And then inside of here, the methods that are in the list interface, such as size, is empty, and some of the other stuff, is accessible, that is consistent across both of these. These are the methods that are common denominators for both of these, the linked list as well as the array list. All right, so when I create these variables, I just normally leave them as list, unless there's a reason to do otherwise. The animals as well as the vehicles are both lists. Doesn't matter what kind of list. I'm using them the same way. All right, so we covered a lot of ground here. Hopefully the scrolling up and down didn't bother you too much. There was a lot to cover, and I had to go back and forth through both of the examples. But take some time to practice this code on your own, play around with it, change things around, create your own methods like this to make sure you understand how this works. So I'm going to wrap up this lesson. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.